All right, my dear fellow listeners, good morning and welcome to another edition of Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. For those of you who have been joining us, will know that we have had some really great guests on the show, and today wouldn't be any different. We will have a guest halfway through of the program, and so I'm looking forward to have him to share some richness again, like what we've had in the past. But I just thought I should take this first half of the show to kind of reflect back on a few of the shows that we have had. And also, I want to share with you some events, interesting events happening, fundraising event, and so on happening locally in the region and out of the region as well too. I just thought I kind of share some of that with you because on our show last week Sunday, obviously we've had some guests from Toronto and so on. And so I just thought I will share you in with those pieces. The good news, though, is that our guest is here, which is a good thing. And so I'll give him a couple minutes to kind of settle in and so on, and then we'll kind of take it from there. And so again, for those of you who have just tuned in, this is our new talk show, Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Our guest, Marinus, is with us here. We've had him a couple weeks ago, but he has so much to share, and we just felt that it was so much needed to have him back, but more so for my sake as well too, because I always enjoy having a chit chat with him. So again, we are going to take a quick break, and we are going to be right back. All right. Good morning once again, and welcome to our weekly show, which takes place every Wednesday from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. right here on 102.7 CKMS FM. And basically, it's a talk show where we kind of chit chat with community-minded people to share information, anything that's relevant, to our listeners, anything. That's related to community development and really to make life easy for everybody. It's a freestyle show, so if you have any input or anything of that kind, you always send them our way. You can always email them to mcnarine@hotmail.com. And as you know, we have had Marinus a few weeks ago, and we've had some really great feedback on the show and so on. And but I always enjoy talking to him because I myself I'm learning so much and so on. And I mean, 1 hour, to share stuff sometimes is just not enough. And so we just felt that it was important. I normally don't do this. This is the second time I'm doing this, but I just felt that it was so important to have him back. And the good news is that he didn't need long notice. I was very impressed about that. By the way, when I asked you, when we were deciding, what should we do for this week, we were debating and so on. I mean, there's always opportunities, but we were thinking about you. And then I said, I'm not sure how much notice you will need. And when you responded back to us so quickly, it made life easy for all of us. I can tell you that for sure. And we will always appreciate that. But anyways, welcome again. You made it here through, man. I'm so glad you're not going to be leaving.
Glad to be here,
okay,
Narine.
okay.
Thanks for the invitation.
No problem. So listen, so thanks again, obviously. But so what's happening? What's new happening since we left? I guess I'll leave it open that way. Like obviously,
The last time we spoke, it was before Christmas.
Yeah.
So we have a new year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you, by the way.
New Years, that, there's the lunar New Year at the end of the month, and then there's the New Year that the Afghani people, the Persian New Year.
That's right. Correct.
So we can ease into the New Year. It doesn't have to be done all at once.
It's always something to celebrate, huh?
Yes.
All right. So what's new and exciting happening? If I was to ask you that question, really, I know it's a new year, and different people have it's not uncommon when it comes to the new year. I'm talking about January to December kind of new year, the general new year, so to speak. I know some people celebrate new year different time and so on, but generally speaking, people will have set goals. It's not uncommon for people to do all of that. If things didn't go as well as they planned, previously, I really are hoping to kind of plan something differently or something that's manageable. So let me put you on the spot here. Do you have any New Year resolution?
No New Year's resolutions. The resolutions I do make are to add rather than to take away. So to enrich your life rather than to limit, eat less or buy less or do this, that kind of thing. So I'm all for that. And I think my New Year's column was about getting involved in things. And we touched on that when we spoke last time. I thought, well, why don't you make getting involved with the arts, culture, heritage, or your community in general, it doesn't have to be arts, culture, and heritage, part of your resolve, which is not like a typical kind of New Year's resolution. It means you're going to add to your life rather than deduct.
For sure. And speaking of that, maybe you obviously we did touch upon the articles that you do and so on, but why don't you take a minute or so to kind of really refresh people about that, because we may have some new listeners and whatnot?
Sure. Well, my day job nowadays is with the Commons Studio, which is part of the Working Center. And the Commons Studio is a media arts access center. So we have equipment. We're a community tools project run by the Working Center to make accessible digital storytelling tools of all kinds to people for whatever purpose. And then I've long been involved, particularly with arts, culture, and heritage. I used to be the executive director of the Waterloo Regional Arts Council. And also for 21 years now, I've written a weekly column on arts and culture for the Waterloo Region Record.
So speaking of that, we were briefly talking about some changes happening municipally, if I'm not mistaken. You're probably on top of it more, because obviously I was preparing for this show. I can't stay on top of everything, you know what I mean? So why don't you fill us in regarding that, and then we'll see how those pieces are connected to the arts, particularly because you are so connected to the arts, right? You've been lucky to really work your way through those pieces.
And through the arts, you get connected with your cities and with the region and all of
for
that.
sure, for sure.
And the Waterloo Regional Arts Council, that was a sort of semi-political position. So I care about how the region is structured and all of that. And the news, of course, is that yesterday it was announced that there's the beginning of a process where the province is going to look at the way particularly two-tiered municipalities like ours, I think there's 8 of them altogether in Ontario, they're going to look at those with a fairly quick agenda. By June, they're going to look at it, think about the various aspects, and by June, there's going to be some kind of report. And that still will be the first step in what might be a long process.
Yeah, for sure.
And that should be of interest to us. And it certainly should be of interest to people in arts, culture, and heritage, because so much of what we do is connected to our municipalities.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I mean, I always say one thing here. I know sometimes people are accustomed to for things to be done a certain way or be in a certain way, but change is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm always open up to change, because for me, I mean, and speaking of the arts, that's just one thing, but like, they're room for improvement, I can say, when it comes to art, in terms of like, because I mean, I'm like local here, in the Kitchener area here. I talk to people on a daily basis. I'm aware of a story people share with me in terms of the passion they have for the arts, or passion they want to really take to the next level, not knowing how the basics of, not knowing how do they get the resources, how do I get started, who do I talk to, kind of thing. And I think that's one of the reasons we invite people like yourself to kind of, particularly that you're in the arts, to really share some of your experiences, some of the stuff that worked for you, you know what I mean? Like, what can you share with our people and all of that, so that they too can kind of really kind of thing. But you brought up a good point, because for me, this whole change that are about to happen, it really, in a sense, it will affect everybody in some little way. Right? The fact that we are here, living here, we don't have to be a politician really to be affected by it, right? Because whatever decision is being made will affect all of us. But I'm just hoping it will be something that will be beneficial for us, really.
Right, exactly. Yes. And we have to think about all those things, what we lose, what we gain.
For sure.
It might not necessarily be an amalgamation process. It could be something entirely different. My greatest fear is that we end up dividing them. I mean, Waterloo County has been an entity for 167 years.
I see what I mean,
I would hate to see the North and the South, and that is a real possibility. But hopefully, it'd be very complicated to split up what the region does between the North and the South. But then when you have all of it, which are now 7 different municipalities, how do you retain connections with your elected representatives? How do you take into account the different sizes of communities?
For sure.
If you have a smaller council, then it's going to be like one representative for all the townships if we're going to do it representation by population. And that gets tricky. It's very, very difficult to do. But it could be interesting, and I'm interested in those. I think there's ways we can do it. My preference is incremental change, bit by bit, and we've done that over time. And what we have now, we've done a wonderful job on many, many levels. But that doesn't mean you couldn't do it better. And I think particularly in the arts, where there's these anomalies and difficulties, and we went through the whole process of having a leadership program that didn't go anywhere, now we're kind of in limbo, so it's not a good time for us. But maybe now, in this context, we can talk about what do we need in terms of structure.
For sure. And I personally know that you are, and you mentioned it, I know you're interested about local, municipal levels of things and so on. And I wish if more people were kind of interested that way and engaged that way, because the thing is, like what I find is that I see, lots of richness in people in terms of what they can offer, and stuff of that kind. But because they're not fully engaged, their contribution, is not fully there as well too. And so I think if people are more engaged, they definitely it will benefit us, the community as a whole,
It'll
but also
benefit the community, but it'll also benefit the people who get engaged, get involved. Because
for sure,
my recommendation is to get involved with the community in one way or another. Not just volunteering and doing little jobs, but making it part of your life. And when you do, you will enrich your life.
oh, for sure, yeah, for sure. I'm glad you said it. For sure, like, obviously there are people who will go and volunteer, they'll do things and so on. It's their little way to kind of give back and so on. But if you kind of make that whole thing, a way of life where you are being part of your community, so you're not like kind of isolated kind of thing, if you know what I mean. So I think, and I mean, arts, what a better way than the arts to do all of this. Right, that's one of the reasons you'll find that summertime, I mean, we have activities wintertime too, but summertime we'll have all kinds of things happening, and I think those are just ways to kind of encourage people to kind of really mix and mingle and kind of engage and really being yourself. Because I mean, in Kitchen Waterloo here, I think the opportunity for me, at least the way I see it, is pretty much lots of opportunities. You just have to kind of navigate yourself through things and all of that. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a very quick break, and then we'll come back. We talk about this in December. I asked you about how you got involved in the arts, and you managed to kind of stick and do projects and involve in those pieces. You've been board members and all of that for arts organization and all of that. And so I'm going to ask you how you got involved, why you got involved, and how people can get involved as well too. Because speaking of all of that engagement piece. All right. Okay. You're listening to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat with our guest Marinus. Always a pleasure to have him with us. And the whole idea obviously of the show is to really share ideas, talk about things that can better our community, all of that. If you would like to be part of the show, just email us your request to mcnarine@hotmail.com. Obviously, we've had a lot of requests, but we would like to kind of keep it local here as much as we can. Again, you're listening to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat on 102.7 CKMS FM. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. All right, and so we are back, and I know so when you're hearing that music, depending, some people do watch back the show and so on, and sometimes people just scan it through and so on. So when they're hearing music, obviously they wouldn't be hearing our voice because we are taking a little bit of a break and so on. So that's what that's all about. So don't confuse yourself, because I've had one or two feedback saying that they're only hearing music and they're not hearing anybody talking. So if you're hearing that, it means that you're not watching the show right from the beginning. I can tell you that for sure. So it is not uncommon for people to take a little break, and usually we take like a little bit of a music break kind of thing. Yeah, but anyways, we're with our guest, Marinus. And so we were talking, speaking of break, during the break, we were talking about all the the board that you've been part of. I think this is important for you to share, because what happened, sometimes people want to be part of a board, don't know how, that's one, but also and the commitment. So why don't you take the time to share a few of the organization you've been with in terms of board members and so on, maybe one at a time, and then I'll kind of ask you one of things in between. But why don't you start with the arts fund, because that's a pretty cool one, I think.
The Arts Fund, I was actually on the committee that Ken Seeling put together in 2002 to design what became the Arts Fund. So I was an advisory, and then it took 5, 6, 8 years, and then eventually I was on the Arts Fund, the board, which at that time did the granting decisions too. And I did the Heritage Foundation too, which is sort of the heritage equivalent, also regional. I did 8 years on that committee, and also with the Kitchener and Waterloo Community Foundation, the grants committee. I was there for 10 plus years. It was very interesting. It was all volunteer work and laborious, because you got to do a lot of work, but it's rewarding.
So we did, I'm aware of the Kitchener Waterloo Foundation organization, grant people them. So, and only share what you're able to share, but I'm assuming that it's not necessarily an easy task, right? Because people will be, if I'm not understanding, so people will be submitting proposals for different projects and so on. So were you one of the people that in charge to kind of take a look, to kind of visualize and see if this makes sense and making a decision kind of thing?
Right.
Oh, that's really? Right. So you had a tough job.
It's a tough job. And it's tough decisions, because you have to respect whatever anyone proposes, because their proposal is not to get money, but to do something in their field or to contribute to the community in some ways. And you have to then decide what gets done and what doesn't. So that's a tough responsibility. And in the case of the Community Foundation, I loved the process, because we used to have to go to the individual organization on site, talk to them, get to know them. So it wasn't just what they put on a piece of paper. It became personal. You then, if you learned, could then go and be the advocate for that particular group when it comes to the committee as a whole.
Yes. So speaking of that, I've put proposal in the past. So speaking of that, one of the things I can share along that line is that there are many people in the community locally here. They have really great ideas, but the problem is they're not able to put together that proposal piece, or they've never done it and so on. Or it's not done in the kind of standard that is expected and so on. Because I personally had a conversation with the ministry regarding this, because obviously if you've never done something of that kind, it can seem like a heavy task. You know what I mean? I've done it many times through locally here, through the city of Kitchener, little grants here and there, because the city in the past, they've supported our community events and stuff of that kind and whatnot. And I find that made it a little bit easy if you've done it a few times and understanding and so on, because once you get to see the impact, what it's doing to the community, it's all making sense and so on. But I can tell you there are a lot of people, I personally behind the scenes assist people to kind of help them along with their proposal project and tips and so on. But it is not an easy thing to really put together. So, you don't have to mention names or anything, obviously, but I'm assuming when you were looking at these proposals, there must have been some sort of situation where you're looking at it and you were seeing that, wow, like this is great, this is a great proposal. But I'm so assuming that you probably look at a few and was not strong proposal wise, the proper wording or wasn't phrased right and all of these pieces, if you know what I mean.
That's true. It varies, right? But sometimes an idea can be strong and you have confidence in the person being able to pull it off, and it might not be written up so neatly. And that's why I like the Community Foundation's process, because it used to be just one line. This is what you want to do. There wasn't all that much in terms of the writing. It was the personal sort of connection that made it possible.
Oh yeah, no.
Now they can only give money to organizations that are charities, so they're restricted. And to be a charitable organization, you have to fulfill certain requirements. So the caliber of the proposals was at a certain level. The Arts Fund, anybody can apply, individual artists, whatever. And so you get a real mix. But it wasn't always the most neatly put together.
Right.
The people on the committee kept an eye open, particularly people who are trying to enter the field, because the Arts Fund only has so much money. What we were looking for is projects where we could give them a little bit, but by giving them a little bit, it would give them credibility for another application to the Ontario Arts Council or Canada Council or that kind of thing, right?
Fantastic,
so we were looking for be able to leverage our small contribution with, and that's happened over and over. So you look for projects that could have that kind of possibility.
For sure. I like what you mentioned there. Sometimes people are just looking for that opportunity, that first time opportunity. But if you have never done that, and if you are going to apply, let's say for a bigger grant elsewhere, the possibility becomes even slimmer.
Well, but my advice would be do it anyway. Get help. Talk to people. There's a lot of people in the arts community can be generous with how people who've gone through the motions, particularly people who have received grants. They're willing to help people who are going through the process, and they know. So there's people who will help, and also you won't lose anything except some effort. If you have a project in mind, you need to get a business plan and a budget and all those things anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
So even if you don't get the funding, it doesn't mean that your project can't be done. Now you're one step closer to having the project defined in a way that's feasible.
Yeah. No, you see why I have you here. Now you see why I have you here. You brought up a good point, because I always say to people, that we wouldn't always be successful at our very first try, and it doesn't matter what that is, right? And you said that so nicely, that when you apply for grant, I get it, or anything for that matter, particularly for grant, seeing that we're talking about grant. Of course, it can be disappointing, because if you really needed that little money or whatever, right, to really take you to the next step, and if you didn't get it and whatnot, extremely disappointing. Because I know, like, all of these organizations, right, it's not like they have like millions of dollars just sitting there. It's a small amount, and usually, if I'm not wrong, they usually have more application and requests than money that they have to kind of give out in most cases.
Especially the Arts Fund, where it was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 1. Ask $10 for every one that you were able to give. So you had to cut it down 80, 90%. That's very difficult. But it still gets done. And every 6 months, there's another investment in making art happen in the community. And
making
over
art
the years,
happen, for sure,
an awful lot of projects got started, and an awful lot of great work was done.
Oh, yes, there's no question. A lot of things, great things happen, because I've seen, some of the people who have received it, because I did keep an eye on it. I mean, I applied personally, and I applied, wasn't necessarily approved and so on. But you brought up a good point, is that it takes you to the next level closer, because now you try to think now, well, how can we still make it happen? And so putting your proposal, if you were to reach out to somebody else, for example, they're going to ask you the same thing, like, show me what is it you want to do, but you already have that. You can already have your proposal, right? This is what you want to do, and so on. And so I think it is a great thing. The one thing for people who are part of it, the way you speak, like I can see, because you weren't getting paid to be part of this organization. It's all voluntary work. So I can see that you are doing it, because you really want to make a difference, or you want to contribute. So the people who are making the decision, though, I just hope, I'm this is just me having conversation here. For me, and it's a tough one, and people view differently. As long as they did a good ethical decision, I think that's all that matters, because it's not an easy one, is what I'm trying to say, right?
Now, for the Ontario Arts Council and for the Canada Council, they do pay the jurors, because there it's peer assessment, so other
Mm-hmm.
artists get to make the decisions and make the recommendations,
Mm-hmm.
and they pay you
Mm-hmm.
good rates, and they
Mm-hmm.
put you up in a hotel room in Toronto, and
I
you go
like that
through the
idea.
whole. And the other thing, they have staff. So
Yes,
uh,
different, totally
I
different.
really recommend applying there because you can work with the Ontario Arts Council
I
staff.
have
They'll
make
take
some
you
note here.
through the application
The anterior
process.
arts, but
That's what they're there for. And then afterwards, they can give you advice about what the jury liked and what they didn't like, right? They give you feedback, which our arts fund can't do because it's too
Yes.
small a community,
Yes.
and it's confidential, so they can't actually tell what will. But it's always worthwhile.
Oh, for sure. And I know so it's okay to start out small too,
Sure.
so because I'm aware of the anti-arts people, and you brought up a good point. They do give you feedback, right? So because and now I see why, because they have staff,
They
right?
have the resources.
And they are really, and I have to say, and I think what's happening too, when you apply, it looks like you have one person is probably in charge for certain sectors or area, something of that kind.
That's right.
Because there you will actually provide a name and say, you'll reach out to, such and such. And if you send an email to that person will get back to you. That person will call you.
It's their job.
That's right. They're doing their job there. And because I had good experience with them that way, to be frank, to really kind of, getting details, sending reminder emails. The deadline is such and such. Here's an example. Here are previous recipients. See what they've done and all of those types of pieces. So I think those ones you can tell that they try their best to kind of do it as fair as possible. Yeah. But now that made sense because you wouldn't necessarily have that locally here. Now that
there's been talk about it, like maybe we should pay and have a jury, just like the Ontarians, but then that costs money. So the money for that has to come out of
somewhere,
the grant. So it's really the Arts Fund giving itself a grant to administer the process. So it's a tricky question.
It is, because I remember when we did one or two little proposal, and so we were thinking, sure enough, we want to do a project, but we want to make sure we have somebody to kind of take charge of this project to make sure things are getting done as well too, right? So we're thinking, okay, well, we can't pay everybody here, but if we pay a little bit of something to one person, at least we know they're in charge to make sure this is getting done, that's getting booked, admin, because you still have to do a little bit of admin pieces, how it goes, all of that, right? Oh yes, we have to make sure, because, and so on. And so when we kind of put a proposal, we put a little, and it was a very small amount. But one of the issues we ran into is that when it comes to the percentage wise, because it was such of a small grant, when it comes to the percentage wise, it looked like, okay, well, so what percent is going towards that, right? So we had a conversation around that. And when you look at it percentage wise, obviously it makes sense. But if you look at it dollar for dollar, and if you look at how many hours the person is actually working for, pretty much volunteer for free, it's like you're pretty much just still contributing like so much more, but it didn't really make sense when you started putting it on paper, So those are all good, really good pieces to know. Yep. So we are going to continue this conversation, very rich conversation. I am so glad I brought you back, because all of these pieces, I was aware of this organization, but it's hard to kind of stay on top with all anyways, and so on. But I'm signed up with them. They do send me email and reminder that they're opening up for grant and so on. And this is something the anterior arts one. People should pay attention to that, because they have lots more. They have lots, and I think they do. Is it them or there's a big arts? I'm not sure. It has they call it the Anterior Premier Awards or something. There's a big grant. They do it annually once a year.
I think that goes through the.
It goes through this as well, the
It certainly helps
it comes through that
call
piece,
for nominations.
Yeah, yes, and so pretty much it's and it goes to individual, any form of the arts, and you really get big cash dollars, the recipient of it, obviously. And so I'm thinking those pieces people should consider too, because if you don't try, you wouldn't know, right? It's worth it.
Right. And actually, one of the things that happens is that our region doesn't get its share of the funding, partly because we like to be sort of independent and we don't ask and all that. If you don't ask, I mean, it's our right.
Oh, yes, for sure.
But the way it worked, I don't know what the current figures are. I'm not up to date with, but 10 years ago, artists in London and artists in Hamilton were getting 5-6 times the amount from Canada Council and Ontario Arts Council than Waterloo Region artists. And why is that? It's not that they discriminated against us. It's that we're emerging, newer, more established artists get larger grants, but also we have that kind of culture that kind of wants to be independent and self-sufficient and all that kind of thing.
So I was going to ask you that question. So is it because we have less people in the region applying?
No, they have the same population.
Oh.
That was the striking part.
Oh, really?
It's also part of the culture.
Oh.
The municipalities have the lowest investment from places like the Ontario Arts Council are the 905 communities outside Toronto, in part because they don't have a center. They're part of their outlying areas, and we have some of those characteristics of the 905 communities.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you get me thinking here now. So I have to look into this a bit more because obviously...
Per capita, they're worse off than communities in the north. And
oh, really?
And that's a problem, right? Why is that? It's partly the way they're built, the culture of the places, and they're emerging, so the art scene isn't strong there. They're also very diverse, all of us, more so than London and all that. And again, that's part of what we are, and we have to face that and deal with it.
Yeah.
Make the best of it, but also how it holds you back, be aware and make the difference.
Yeah. All right. And so for those of you who have just tuned in halfway through, this show is different than our weekly Sunday show, The Caribbean Spice. This is a talk show. We call it Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. It is a local initiative with a global impact. We are going to take a quick break, but I have to take this opportunity to say hello to my good friend Akilu, watching us all the way from Guyana. Classmate, a former classmate, very good family gentleman. We have Rebecca watching us locally as well too, so we appreciate all of that. And wherever you're watching or listening from, we appreciate your time, I can tell you that. On this show we've had like some really good richness, and the thing is, when the show is done, people like yourself, it's not done for me, because all the things that we're talking about, I try to dig and see, what's happening here. And that's the whole purpose of it. And so it's always a beautiful thing to have, people with lots to offer. And Marinus, our guest today, who made it through despite, I think, is this today the worst? I wouldn't say worst, but it's one of the worst day, I guess, for this winter season, I can say. It's not like terrible outside, but it
sounded terrible on the radio. They kind of exaggerate, right?
For sure.
The school buses aren't running and all that. And I thought, maybe I'll take the bus. But
so we have cancellation today?
There are in particularly Stratford.
Not here in Kitchener, right?
Here, no.
Okay, because I wasn't aware of that. Okay, good to know. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and we are going to be right back. You're listening to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat on 102.7 CKMS FM. All right, we are back. You're watching and listening. Let's chit chat with Narine Dat. One thing I should say though, um, uh, though we have started very recently with this new talk show, we have stolen the hearts of many people, and that's one of the things I like with local initiative, because you probably saw on our Facebook, and some the little things very important to us, and so we were given that award for our work. And because and I was more excited that this show was part of it as well too, because it's such of a new show and people are still, we're still branding it and so on. I know our Caribbean Spice Radio show is very much branded, but this one is a new one. It's totally different, and the fact that people like it and all of that, it's a beautiful thing. So we ask you to continue to share our page and so on. So one of the things I like to do when it comes to the end part of the show is to talk about employment, because it doesn't matter where we live, whether that be locally here in the region of Waterloo, in Ontario, Canada, out of Canada, because we have people out of the country watching and listening to us as well too. Employment, and as a job developer, obviously, that's where my strength lies as well too. So I always like to kind of have a conversation with our guests when it comes to employment. So when it comes to employment, and I know you, though you don't work in that department, or you work for an organization, obviously, that does that and does it so well. So when it comes to the arts and so on, I know last time we were talking about, wanting to get into the arts, and all of that. So like, what advice do you have for people who, want to get into the arts, whether that be as a musician, whether that be, whatever, right? What advice do you have to for them, especially the younger ones, I'm thinking?
And there's also those, like being a volunteer or being on a board or being part of a committee. That's getting involved with the arts too. You don't necessarily, I was never an artist myself. I mean, my background is a history, that kind of thing, right? So I'm not an artist.
Speaking of history, for those of you who missed our episode with him when we had him in December, he actually taught history in Jamaica for a few years.
At the University of the West Indies.
Look at that, Yeah. And I have a lot of friends who graduated from that university. I did not know that until then, and that's amazing, eh? So I know people might be surprised that you actually went to Jamaica, not in a bad way, in a good way. I mean it.
It was great.
To actually go in in such of a different, especially those times, because I would think that if you were to go back there now, obviously it will be different, but I don't think the cultural shock will be a big deal for you anymore.
No, because there's many more connections. You've got the internet, you've got, Facebook and all those kind of things. They didn't have that then.
True.
So you were really cut off. It was, you could write letters, but it took a long time to go back and forth, or call, but whatever. But it was,
So if I was to ask you, if you were to have the opportunity to go back to a place of such a gain, like, will you do it, you think?
Oh, I think so, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the experience, if I understand it correctly, the experience then probably was a good one.
The opportunity was just totally unexpected, in terms of employment. That's the advice I give to people, is that you don't know what's around the corner, and you can't even imagine the possibilities. And this came at me out of the blue, just through coincidences, and it made such a big difference. It made all the difference in my life. It was a way of contributing, because I had students for 3 years, year after year, and all that, and lectures and all that. But at the same time, it made a big difference for me.
For sure. So do you think that so how can you explain the difference? Because that's something totally different, like the history, right? And American history, I think you were talking about. Is it American
U.S.
U.S. American history, to be very specific.
It's important because we're Americans too, right? They should. There's Central America.
Yeah, and I think it probably, I would imagine, especially especially to that level, I would assume that many people who took those courses and so on, I can see that they've gotten benefit from it, especially for the ones that migrated, and kind of now living in the States, because a lot of people, obviously from the Caribbean and whatnot, migrated here and elsewhere, but particularly in the USA, right? And so I'm assuming that having that kind of knowledge, I think they definitely was beneficial for them to understanding, the history, and now they're probably part of that culture there, that new modernized culture now, is what I can say, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so Yeah. So when we talk about the employment, you talk about, engaging yourself, maybe consider volunteering that field. Um, volunteer, as a board member, you have done all of that, because one of the things it does, for sure, is that you are connecting with people, and you're
And,
connecting with
and you're increasing the chances of getting lucky like I was, because you don't know what those opportunities are. And the more you circulate and the broader your range of experiences and connections are, the greater chances that you can be fortunate. Something comes along that you had never even imagined, and now that's where you fit.
For sure. Oh yes, for sure. So for me, I always say to people, you don't want to necessarily narrow yourself down into one thing. If you have a passion for the arts or for anything for that matter,
Yep.
because everybody needs job, and all of that, you really want ideally, you want to be able to find that fit, and you wouldn't find that fit, just like that. You wouldn't, I know that obviously things have changed, with the internet, and people can apply, and you can sign up, and you can receive job notification and all that, but I still think it's different. Totally different than engaging, meeting the people,
For sure.
show up, have a conversation with somebody. They will get to know you, because a lot of the times, believe it or not, employers and the stats, I'm still right on this the stats here, about 80% of the people, or employers, they still don't really advertise openly of any little openings they may have, for a variety of different reasons. One, they probably don't have the resources and manpower to manage all of those applications and all of that. And so if they are hiring somebody, and if you are networking with them, you're getting to know them, you're volunteering, you're making yourself known, you're giving yourself the opportunity to kind of see what is it that you like, and so on. It can make all the difference, for sure. I'll
Yep.
tell you right now, to share with you. I love what I do as a job developer locally here in Kitchener, but it was, and I take it as a compliment, by the way. A few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, there was a fellow from Toronto. He sent me an email. I sent me a message through LinkedIn, and he said to me, Narine, I read your profile, and if the money was right, would you consider working with us?
Okay.
Without me applying for anything, or anything of that kind, but it goes to show that when you're navigating things through, when you're meeting people, when you're getting yourself known out there, it can make all a big difference. I'm glad you said it, because at the end of the day, like, we have to go out there and seek, right? So nobody will know that, okay, well, this is what I want to do, this is what you want to do. You have to be the one going out there, and kind of really do your bits and pieces. So if I was to ask you, I know you've been obviously with the Studio Commons, is that what you guys call it now? Common Studio. I was close there. Common Studio. And I have to come visit you back there, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll come now that the holiday is done, and so on. I'll come.
Please do.
Oh yes, I'll step over there. It's like right close to where I work. I'll take a look there. So how long have you been with them, actually?
Well, I was involved right from the very beginning, since 2006, when I was with the Arts Council, because the Arts Council was one of the partners that helped what was originally called the Multicultural Cinema Club.
Oh, that's right. Going. Yeah.
But I've been working there for about 5 years.
Oh, okay, but you've been involved prior to that.
Since 2006 is when it started, so it's 12 years. Since
oh, wow.
13 this year, yeah.
So they used to do, when they used to call the multicultural cinema or something like that kind,
Yep.
They used to do this kind of ongoing, I guess I can say, film competition type of thing. Or something.
They had an annual festival called the Local Focus Film Festival.
Yeah, something like that.
And people would put in entries. Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore, in part because it was so difficult to organize. But I still would like to do something in its place.
Something along that
I was
line,
just on an input session for the Grand River Film Festival, which is currently on hiatus. But if they could introduce some of that local focus into what they do.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, because what happened, let's say people are going to a common studio and they're working on small projects, and whether that be a little documentary, whatever that may be, right? I think ideally people will want to get it out there, I would think, right?
Yeah.
So
and we still do that. I mean, it doesn't have to be only the festivals. You can do
it in different
workshop
ways.
screenings. You can show it to your peers and get input.
For sure.
We do kind of help people with that kind of thing.
Okay, so do you have any not necessarily relationship, but do you do any work with Omni TV at all? Like have you had anybody who produce project at the
There are people
comic?
involved in the studio that have been
Cooks.
involved in
Oh,
those
really?
kind of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know they seem to be open to have ideas, like if people have good materials and so on.
Now, Omni's one I haven't thought of in a while. But there's others.
Yeah.
Five, for instance, was pretty interested
I
in
have
local content.
So I have to look
And it's
into
the
that.
Bell Five, and there's some people here locally that did end up getting paid to do
Oh, really?
content for Five.
I have to look into that one.
Kitchener Sink. It's a great, so many episodes, and it's a comedy. And there's others who have been talking to those people. So those opportunities do exist, but it's hard. It's very difficult.
It is extremely difficult. I mean, well, Omni's kind of known. I guess a lot of people know. They are aware of Omni, and they've been about for a while. And a lot of people I've seen have gotten some reasonable opportunities and so on. But I mean, at the end of the day, nothing is really easy. And for me, if you're very much passionate about something, you have to have that. You have to continue with those positive energy. You have to continue to try. Because for me, the worst thing you can do is not to give it a shot, because you're not going to easily knock on a door, and say, okay, guess what? I have this project, I think it will be great. Those people have to make sure it's a good fit too because, their rules and regulation is, I guess, this
for sure.
And so on, right? Yep. They have to make sure it's a good fit. Because if it's a content that they're already running, let's say Omni, for example, if they're already running, I think they have like a Caribbean thing going on there. So if they already have something similar, they probably wouldn't want something from me that's so close, right? They want something new ideas, fresh ideas. They're open to all of that. So it wouldn't be any different, I think, with Vibes and Kitchener Sink. Is that what you say?
That's the name of the program.
Oh, I have to look into that program. I have never heard of it.
Duncan Finnegan and Lyndon Horsfall, they're local filmmakers.
Okay, good.
Duncan used to work with us at the Common Studio, and they put in a proposal, and it was accepted.
Oh, wow.
And
name the program on that? Oh, really?
It's called Kitchener Sink.
Oh, really? So, okay.
We got a chance to see it. I don't have Fibe. I don't have cable TV at all. But they showed all the episodes at the Apollo Theater, so we got to see them.
So, and let's not forget too that like even our local Rogers station and so on, they do. I see one or two people have gotten a little bit of opportunity to do one or two things here and there, and a lot of people volunteer as well too. So there's always opportunity, because I've seen, believe it or not, I don't know them personally, but I've seen people started off at places like Rogers, but then they've gone elsewhere. I've seen it personally. And also Lisa. Let's not forget that Lisa, she started locally here at when they used to call the station CKCO. And now you remember Lisa? La Flamme, Lisa.
Yeah.
All right. And now she's a big anchor, right? So it goes to show that people do start locally and then they're moving on to mainstream level, which is great. But anyways, this pretty much wraps up our conversation here today. I've learned so much today. So you basically you're leaving me with a lot of work now, because I have lots of digging to do just to see what I can do with the information you have shared. Please don't forget to continue to share our page so that people can see and hear our richness that we have discussed earlier today. But I would like to quickly obviously say hello to Omkar. Thank you so much for taking the time to take a sneak peek to see what we do here, and Savi as well too. I really appreciate that, and all of you for taking the time. So until next time, this is MC Narine, and this is Marinus. I'm wishing you a great today and even more better tomorrow. See you.
Bye-bye.